Chapter 1. Demige takes center stage. My familiars and I were on our way to the Holy Kingdom of Rubenhof, and had set up camp for the night in the massive forest that stretched across the border between the Holy Kingdom and the nearby cluster of smaller nations. We'd set out from Carolina earlier that morning, and theoretically we could have made it all the way to the Holy Kingdom in a single day's travel, but that would have meant arriving at the church's main temple after night had already fallen. Wrecking the place that late at night would mean fewer witnesses, and that, I figured, would probably make our effort to send a message a lot less effective. The more people there were around to see the Rubenhofs get taken down a peg, the greater the impact this would have. And so, after consulting with my familiars, we'd decided to bed down in the woods and finish our journey to the Rubenhofs' main temple the following morning. And now that we have agreed on our plan, it is time for us to eat. Yes, indeed. We'll have to be thoroughly prepared for tomorrow's venture, after all. And by prepared, you mean stuff. Nothing better before a fight than a full stomach. Swale eat tons. You guys are making it sound like you don't gorge yourselves even when we don't have an important mission to take care of, I jabbed. Not to mention. And besides, you're gonna be stuffing yourselves again tomorrow morning, aren't you? I see no need to state the obvious. Really, you have to ask. Yeah, what we eat tomorrow's got nothing to do with what we eat now. Swale eat lots now and tomorrow. You guys seriously have no sense of restraint. It might do you good to hold back at least a little every once in a while, you know? Though I'd guess that's too much to ask from the four great gluttons, I reflected with a chuckle as I started getting dinner ready. Not that there was much for me to do this time. I just had to take some pre-made meals I'd cooked in Carolina out from my item box. I figured there was no chance at all of anything bad happening to my familiars during our raid on the church. But that said, we were trying to put on a pretty flashy show, so I wasn't taking the attack too lightly. Fel and Gun could speak the human tongue, so their efforts would be particularly essential. As such, I'd decided to prepare a dish that, according to a superstition back in my homeland, would ensure victory in any endeavor. Here you go, guys. It's katsudon night. I set down my familiar's extra-large personal bowls, each of which was filled with a heaping helping of katsudon. All four of them dug in so quickly, you'd think I'd kept them waiting for hours. Yup, I thought to myself with a nod. Nothing beats katsudon when you have a big day coming up tomorrow. You called this dish katsudon, my liege? It's exquisite, Gun said between ravenous mouthfuls. Oh, right. I guess this would be his first time trying it. The dish consisted of fried pork cutlets or, well, technically orc cutlets, in this case, briefly simmered in a delicious salty-sweet sauce made from soy sauce, mirin, and sugar. Then you pour a beaten egg on top and let it cook until it's just on the right side of half done, and serve it over a heaping bowl of freshly cooked rice. Seriously, there's no way a dish like this wouldn't be delicious. I was starting to drool just looking at my familiar's meals and decided to get started myself, digging into my own bowl with a pair of chopsticks. Yap, that's delicious, all right, I said, then I wolfed down the rest of the bowl at a breakneck pace. Phew. Your katsudon was truly delectable, my liege. Yes, it was thoroughly acceptable. I, however, would have preferred the meat in isolation. You mean the cutlets, right? Yeah, those are some seriously good stuff. Sway likes it both ways. We'd finished our dinner, and were now chatting together as we enjoyed some glasses of after-meal soda. Considering how much Fel had just eaten, I could only roll my eyes at his half-hearted protests. He'd eaten even more than usual, actually, as had the rest of my familiars. Maybe they'd been especially voracious in preparation for tomorrow. They'd been so hungry, I had actually started to think I might run out of katsudon before they were satisfied, which had put me into a bit of a panic. Oh, don't worry. I made plenty of plain cutlets too, so you can have those for breakfast tomorrow morning, I said, much to everyone's delight. I'd be opting for a significantly lighter breakfast menu myself, of course. In my four familiars' eyes, gorging yourself on meat first thing in the morning was only natural, and so long as there was enough of it, they didn't fuss too much over how it was prepared. Starting off their day with oily, fried meats was no problem at all for them. Sometimes I wonder how their stomachs can take all the nonsense they throw at them. Oh, but I guess Sway doesn't have a stomach to begin with, huh? I was feeling a little queasy just imagining the piles of cutlets I'd be serving tomorrow morning, and took a sip of the black coffee I was drinking from my favorite mug to soothe my stomach. That's enough thinking about tomorrow's breakfast, anyway. More importantly. Hey, Fel, Gun. About tomorrow, do you two still remember what you're supposed to say to them? I asked. I'd given them a telepathic rundown of exactly what I wanted them to say and do while we were en route. We were trying to put on a show of force, and the better we were at demonstrating the power we could bring to bear, the more convincing it would be. That was why Fel, Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway would be taking center stage, while I'd be hiding away on Gan's back. Fel and Gan had particularly important roles in our skit, so I wanted to make sure they knew their parts. Me. Of course I do, Fel said with an air of absolute confidence. I am a follower of Ninria, goddess of wind, who in turn serves Demiurge, god of all creation. I would not think to sully my goddess's name before a divine being who stands above her. I shall not fail. I don't intend to cause any issues either. This will be child's play, declared Gan, also confident as could be. Well, that's good, I guess. Counting on you two tomorrow as well, Dora-chan, Sway. You gotcha. Sway'll do Sway's best. Strangely enough, I found myself more worried about the ever-self-assured Gan and Fel than I was about the other two. After my gluttonous quartet ate way too many cutlets the following morning to prepare themselves for the day ahead, we crossed the border into the Holy Kingdom of Rubenorf. Before I knew it, we'd arrived at our destination, the Church of Rubenorf's main temple. I hadn't actually had any clue where the temple was, honestly, but Old Man Gan had known exactly where we were headed. According to him, it stands out like a sore thumb, which makes it a useful landmark. As we sat down in the plaza in front of the temple, I could already see what he meant. Gun had returned to his full size, and yet the plaza was big enough that he was still able to comfortably land with room to spare. The temple itself, meanwhile, seemed to have been deliberately built to loom over the area, and was enormous in its own right. I know he said it stood out, but this is just absurd. Is that seriously a church? I asked in disbelief from Gun's back, where I would be staying the whole time if things went according to plan. The temple was just too huge, so huge that at a glance, I would have assumed it was a castle if I hadn't known otherwise. It was even bigger than Gan at his full size. It was intricately decorated too, to such an extent that you could instantly tell how tremendously expensive it must have been to build. Even the window frames were lavishly wrought. It was a monument to excess, through and through. I took a moment to gape at the sheer opulence of the temple, but was soon snapped out of my daze when screams and shouts began to ring out. At just about the same moment, a troop of knights clad in glimmering silver armor came pouring out of the temple. Hear ye, foul beast! We, the paladins of Rubenorf, shall smite thee down with the might of holy judgment, cried out a knight at the center of the formation, who was wearing even flashier armor than the rest of his crew. Foul, you say? Fel scoffed with an enraged grimace. You would call a Fenrir foul? Then know, insolent humans, that when I rend your flesh and shatter your bones, it was you who brought that fate upon yourselves. Oh, is that all you would do to them? Asked Gun, who seemed just as angry. To call an ancient dragon like me a beast is to beg for immolation, to be burned away by my dragon breath until not even ashes remain. The two of them seemed ready to lay into the knights at any second, so I sent them a frantic message. Fel, hold off on the violence. You swore you weren't going to screw this up last night, didn't you? But, these insects. And you too, Gun, what happened to this being child's play? Well, you see. Please, guys, you're throwing off the whole script. And you still have to give Demiurge his moment in the spotlight. Demiurge was the cornerstone of this whole operation, and if those two lost their tempers and went on the warpath, it would ruin everything. Just stick to the plan, okay? I'm begging you. Yeah, seriously, Dora-chan chimed in. We spent all that time running through the whole plan, and you're freestyling already? You two suck at this. Fel and Old Man Gun suck at this. Sway parroted. Grr. Ooh. After all the bravado they'd shown the night before, they'd really earned this moment of ridicule. Come on, Dora-chan. Come on, Sway. Let 'em know what you really think. Anyway, I transmitted, just stick to the script. No more improved. If the two of you mess this up, then you can kiss dinner tonight goodbye. Why you need not remind me. Very well. Holding their meal hostage had finally gotten through to them, it seemed. Fel and Gun paused to collect themselves, then began reciting the lines I'd planned out for them. I am a Fenrir, servant of Ninrir, the goddess of wind, said Fel. I have come at the behest of Demiurge, god of all creation and lord of all deities. And I am an ancient dragon, a member of the eldest and most powerful race that has watched over this world since time's primeval, said Gun. I, too, have come to fulfill the god of all creation's divine mission. Hear ye, humans, Fel and Gun continued in unison. Listen well to the voice of Demiurge himself. Okay, Demiurge, that's your cue. I sent out in a telepathic message that I knew for a fact Demiurge the habitual mind-reader would hear. The ball was in his court now. Ahem. Yes, well, I am Demiurge, this world's god of all creation and the highest ranking among its divine entities. I've chosen to speak with you today on account of a number of doubts I've come to harbor, and to start, I would like to have a few questions answered to clear those doubts away. You there. Yes, you, the Pope. Stop that quivering, stand up, and come outside. Demiurge's now familiar voice echoed in my mind once more, but this time, I knew I wasn't alone. I'd relayed our plan to him in advance, and he had agreed to speak with all of the followers of the Church of Rubenorf, in other words, everyone in the Holy Kingdom of Rubenorf, plus all the high-ranking individuals in other religions that didn't worship one of the four goddesses or their divine associates, as well as the royalty of the multitude of nations that were around. Demiurge had informed me that he'd be perfectly capable of sending his message to literally everyone on the continent, but we'd eventually decided that doing so would be overkill and had chosen to limit our scope. Even with his message only being delivered to that limited group of people, of course, I still suspected that we might have been overdoing it a little. In fact, we'd only just begun and I was already seeing signs of how effective his message would be. The people around us looked absolutely astonished. Some were gulping with apprehension, and others had fallen to their knees and started praying on the spot. I guess that's fair, honestly. It's not every day that most people hear a god's voice in their head. Well, I'm waiting, said Demiurge. That must have done the trick, as a moment later, a group of men wearing white priest's robes with gaudy golden embroidery rushed out of the temple. One of them, the Pope, I assumed, was dressed even more extravagantly than the rest, with precious gems sewn into his ostentatious outfit. That certainly took you long enough. So, you're the representatives of the Church of Rubenorf. Would you care to tell me who Rubenorf is? PFF. D. Demiurge, you're really asking that now? Wait, is it just me, or are the Pope and his cronies looking a little pale? Actually, they look like they might pass out on the spot. Don't tell me they know that Rubenorf's not real. Well, does anyone feel like answering me? Demiurge asked. After a very lengthy moment of hesitation, the Pope finally spoke up. The square was packed, but it had fallen so deathly silent that I could hear him clearly, even though he wasn't exactly shouting. Our Rubenorf is the omniscient and almighty G-God of humanity. And mankind is blessed by his benevolent glory, he said. The omniscient and almighty God of humanity, is he? Well, as I just informed you, I happen to be the God of all creation, who reigns over all other divinities. It goes without saying that there isn't a god in this realm I am unaware of, and so I can say with the utmost certainty that there is no such god as Rubenorf. Moreover, the gods do not discriminate by race under any circumstance, Demiurge declared definitively, sending a stir throughout the entire plaza. That cannot be, the Pope began in an attempt to mount an objection, but Demiurge wasn't about to let him get away with that. To lie to the gods is futile. You of the Church of Rubenorf's upper echelons know the truths I speak perfectly well. You were taught them when you assumed your positions. You know that the Church of Rubenorf is a false faith, founded solely to amass gold for its leaders' benefit. You know this, and yet you remain in your positions in spite of it. In other words, you are all nothing more than miserly moneygrubbers. As Demiurge revealed the truth behind their religion's founding, the leaders of the church went from pallid to white as a sheet. They were tottering around so unsteadily, I really thought they'd collapse at any moment. But that, in and of itself, is hardly a cause for divine intervention. In this modern era you live in, money is an essential need. I would not stick my nose into your business over a scam, no matter how much it allowed you to line your pockets. However, is it just me, Demiurge, or are you really, really mad right now? I'm kinda getting goosebumps over here. What else have you done? Demiurge continued. You have treated the beastfolk, the elves, and the dwarfs as your playthings. You have even forced your fellow men to surrender their sons and daughters to you when they suited your fancy, toying with them until they ceased to amuse you, then selling them off as slaves. Such misdeeds are as natural as drawing breath for those in your church's employ, and none are more guilty than those who stand at the top of your rank. You sold your own people to the Geisler Empire, knowing full well they would be used as living targets for their armies to whet their blades upon, and you also knew of the even grislier fate, too terrible to even be spoken, that would await them after their death. A fate too terrible to be spoken that would await them after they died. What's this all about? And Demiurge is the one describing it like that. That's beyond terrifying. This seems an apt moment to say a word to the Empire's leaders, as well. I know you can hear me, O Emperor. Your imperial way is to view those outside of your lands as subhuman. That viewpoint is what has led you to begin your sickening practices, and you must cease them at once. Should you partake in your dark ways ever again from now on, I will not turn a blind eye, and lest you think your actions will go unobserved, know that I am always watching. Yikes. I didn't realize he had it out for the Empire too. All that I knew about the Geisler Empire was that their borders had been locked down for decades and that they were militaristic to an outrageous degree. Oh, and also that the countries that bordered the empire apparently had frequent skirmishes with imperial expeditionary forces. Those tidbits alone were enough to convince me that I never wanted to have anything to do with the place, and if Demiurge had his eye on them, I wanted even less to do with them than ever. But let us return to the Church of Rubinov. As I believe I've made clear, the Church's misdeeds are as numerous as the stars in the sky. You have assumed the mantle of a false god to commit wrongdoing of the highest order, and I can no longer turn a blind eye to your villainy. The highest order? And again, this is Demiurge saying that. Those Rubinovs must really be genuinely irredeemable. That being the case, it's time for your punishment. Ahem. Fenrir, ancient dragon, clean up this mess for me, Demiurge ordered. Ho ho ho, oh, I've always wanted to say that. Demiurge. I'm guessing you didn't mean for us to hear that last part, did you? And wait, were you quoting Mito Koman just now? You watched that show? Very well, Fel and Gun said together, doing their best to keep a straight face in spite of Demiurge's play acting. Hey, Fel barked. If you do not wish to be caught in the devastation, you would do well to move away from that building at once. Take this warning as a sign of the great Demiurge's compassion, Gun added. We, however, are not so merciful, and will do our duty whether you get out of the way or not. The self-proclaimed paladins and gaudily clad priests broke ranks and fled as fast as their legs could carry them, which was, I had to admit, actually pretty fast. Now then, let us begin. Indeed. Imin. Sway too. Fel and Gan were a given, but it seemed that Dora-chan and Sway were on standby as well. All of my familiars were ready and waiting to blow the temple away, but that was when a shout suddenly rang out. Inu. No more of your lies. The word of Rubinov is law, and with his blessed blade I shall smite the foul beasts who besmirch his Nami, bellowed one of the paladins, the one wearing the fanciest suit of armor, as he burst through the doors of the temple, holding a sword in his hands. A magic sword. I gasped. It was only then that I remembered how Elrond had once told me that the Church of Rubinov had a magic sword called Joyce sealed away in its main temple. Oh, crap. He might actually be able to beat everyone with that thing. I had sprung into motion before I even knew what I was doing, sliding off Gun's back, jumping to the ground, and pulling the magic sword I'd used the most so far, Gram, out of my item box. Then I leapt forward, raising the blade high. Hra! Clang! And intercepted the paladin's strike, blocking his magic sword with my own. You believed an attack such as that could injure us? Really, my liege. Moreover, the magical power within that sword is nowhere even close to enough for it to be considered a true magic sword. It's a fake. Though I suppose you don't need me to tell you that, considering. Huh! I grunted as I looked up, just in time to see the paladin's magic sword snap like a twig, its blade falling cleanly away from its hilt. This can't be, the paladin wailed. Oh, yes, indeed, that's no magic sword. It must have been, a century ago. Maybe two. The details escape me, but in any case, the Church of Rubenorf's officials at the time decided to pawn the real sword for some quick cash. Demiurge, you really know how to kick a guy when he's down. Just look at him. He's literally fallen to his knees from the shock of it all. Thankfully, the rest of the self-proclaimed paladin squad quickly arrived to drag their crestfallen companion away. I must say, your movements were rather sharp for someone as timid as you. You know, Fel, you don't have to hedge every single compliment you give me with an insult. Now then, with that out of the way, let us begin. Kraku. KSHK, boom. Kra. Pshoo, 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 pshoo. Pew, pew, pew. A veritable lightning storm conjured by Fel, an enormous boulder brought forth by Gan, a series of jagged ice spears manifested by Dora-chan, and a stream of acid bullets spat by Sway all slammed into the castle-like temple at once. When the flashes of light and cloud of dust finally dissipated, all that remained of the structure were pebble-sized fragments of stone. While everyone around us was busy freaking out about the Church of Rubenorf's main temple being turned into gravel, we made ourselves scarce. We'd be heading to Ronkainen next, but at my familiar's request, we once again made a stop in the woods between the Holy Kingdom of Rubenorf and the border nations to have a meal. I let out a sigh of relief as I climbed off Gun's back. I'm not so sure I can say that ended well, but one way or another, I'm glad it's over, I said. That was hardly enough of a challenge to satisfy me, Fel grumbled, apparently upset that it had all ended in a single attack. True, Gun agreed. I couldn't agree more, especially seeing as you prohibited me from using my dragon breath, my liege. Of course I did, because if you had used it, you'd have turned the whole square into scorched earth, I retorted. And anyway, what were you expecting? If you two had gone all out, you probably would have blown the whole country away. Which would have been all the better, in my view. I see no need to keep such a rotten nation around. Oh, come on, Fel. Demiurge said this was supposed to be a punishment, not an execution. Holding back was just the right call. Okay, but did you really need all of us to get in on the action if all we were gonna do was blow the hell out of that one building? Dora-chan asked. I mean, probably not, when you put it that way, I admitted. I just thought it'd be better to have everyone work together, you know? Especially considering that if I picked out one of you to handle it, the rest of you would never let me hear the end of it. Sway wanted to pew-pew more. Even Sway's on their side these days. Regardless, it is over and done with. Once we have finished our business in Ronkainen, we shall depart for a destination that will prove far more entertaining, Fel said. Was that part of the plan? Gun asked. What do you mean, entertaining? Dora-chan added. Really, Uncle Fel? Sway's excited now. Sway exclaimed. Whoa, wait a second. Where are you planning on taking us, Fel? Heh. You will see soon enough. Excuse me, Fel? Why are you making this sound so ominous? Oh, I've got a really bad feeling about this one. This anxiety's gonna kill me one of these days. I tried to question Fel further, but my familiars were too hungry to put up with any delays and I ended up being pressured into preparing our meal instead. I brought out some dungeon pork and spring onion bowls I'd made in advance to serve as a late lunch, But then they started saying that they wanted to go out for a hunt to get some post-meal exercise. It seemed they weren't about to pass up the opportunity to go hunting, seeing as we were already in the middle of a forest. In the end, they set off into the woods for their hunt before I could stop them, and I never got the chance to press Fel for the details of whatever he'd been implying. For crying out loud. I don't care if it helps with their digestion, they still shouldn't just run off to hunt like that, I grumbled to myself. I tried to make an argument that if we were going somewhere that Fel considered entertaining anyway, then we didn't really need to go hunting now, but my familiars had told me that what we did now and what we would do then were totally unrelated, and had left before I could get another word in. I was left in the woods with nothing but the eerie cries of unknown animals somewhere in the distance to keep me company, and had to keep reminding myself that Fel had put up a barrier, so I'd be fine, no matter what happened. This sure is boring, though. I'm just gonna get more and more negative about everything if I don't find something to do, I mused. I'll have to use portable burners since my magic stove's busted, but I guess I might as well get started on making dinner. What to make, though? Oh, I have an idea. I'll close my eyes, stick my hand into my item box, and I rifled around in my item box at random for a moment, until my hand touched a lump of some sort of meat. All right, I'll make something out of this, I said as I pulled it out to find that I'd selected a chunk of gigant minotaur meat, which I'd obtained a truckload of back in the bricks dungeon. Gigant minotaur, eh? I muttered as I pondered my options. I know. I'll stir-fry it with some garlic chives. Gigant minotaur meat could be used to make an incredible rice bowl if you paired it with a sweet and salty seasoning. I had a feeling that my quartet of gluttons would be coming back with their stomachs grumbling, and I knew they'd be happy with the choice as well. With that decided, let's stock up on ingredients, I said. Opening up my online supermarket to buy whatever I was missing had become a matter of course for me at that point. I brought up the menu, tossed some garlic chives into my shopping cart, checked out, and opened up the cardboard box that appeared a moment later. Okay, that's everything I need. Now then, first things first. I started by cutting the gigant minotaur meat into bite-sized slices. I wasn't aiming for any precise dimensions this time around. Something somewhat close to the size and thickness of the pre-sliced barbecue meat they sell in stores was what I usually went for, on account of the fact that this was the dish I always made when I needed to use up leftover meat of that exact type after a solo barbecue session. Anyway, once the meat was ready, I sliced the garlic chives into 4 or 5 centimeter long strips. Then I lightly seasoned the meat with salt and pepper, coated it in a thin layer of potato starch, and put together a seasoning mixture of soy sauce, sake, mirin, and sugar, plus ground garlic and ginger, fresh out of the tube. Okay, that takes care of all the prep work. I heated some sesame oil in a frying pan and threw the gigant minotaur meat in first. Once the meat was brown and reasonably cooked through, I stirred in the seasoning mixture, then added the chives last, stir-frying them for just a moment before I pulled the pan off the burner. I sampled a bite of the stir-fry. Yup, that's the stuff. I'm craving a bowl of rice already. I brought out an earthenware pot full of freshly cooked, piping hot rice that I'd made back in Carolina, which I piled up in our bowls and then topped with ample helpings of the gigant minotaur and chive stir-fry. With that, our meal was complete. I also made additional extra-large helpings for the Chowhound crowd and stashed them in my item box, of course. That recipe came together so quickly, I think I still have some time on my hands, I said to myself, then decided that I might as well whip up another dish while I was at it. This one would be kept in reserve for another meal, though. I decided to use some leftover ground cockatrice meat to make cockatrice soboro, a ground meat dish often served on top of rice. I'd had Sway help me make soboro out of dungeon pork and beef back at home, but I didn't have any of the poultry variants in stock at the moment. Some soboro recipes called for meat alone, and that was perfectly tasty too, but I decided to make a version with a bunch of vegetables in it as well, for variety's sake. I knew very well that I was the only one with that particular preference, but I also knew how tasty it would be when I was finished, so I figured no one would mind too much. If I was going to make soboro packed full of goodies, I'd have to get all those goodies prepared first. I bought a pre-blanched mixture of onions, carrots, peppers, shiitake mushrooms, and bamboo shoots from my online supermarket, and diced all of them up into very fine pieces. And with that, I was already done with everything I needed to take care of before starting to cook. I oiled and heated a frying pan, dropped in the ground cockatrice meat, and got to stir-frying once more. Once the meat had browned, I added the vegetables and kept stir-frying until they were cooked through as well, at which point I added some soy sauce, mirin, sake, sugar, and ground ginger, once again from a tube. All that was left at that point was to stir-fry a while longer to cook out most of the liquid, and it was finished. I sampled a bite of my second dish as well. All right. This one turned out great too. I let the cockatrice soboro cool down just a little, then scooped it into several extra-large Tupperware containers to save for later. I'd made so much that a single container just wasn't big enough. That sort of pre-cooked meat was incredibly handy for all sorts of things, so I always made a ton. You could eat it as is on rice, of course, but it was also great inside an omelette, or as an ingredient in fried rice. I should really make more of this stuff to keep in stock, I said to myself, and then set about doing just that, using 4 portable burners at once to cook up a huge quantity of cockatrice soboro. By the time I'd finished filling my last extra-large Tupperware container and stored it in my item box, the sun was beginning to set. Fel and the others have got to be getting back soon, right? I pondered as I sipped a can of coffee, and just as I was finishing up my drink, I noticed Gun flying through the red-tinted sky toward me. "Welcome back. How'd it go?" I asked as he landed and the others climbed down off him, though judging from the frowns on their faces, I could already guess the answer. "There are no monsters with meat worth eating to be found in this forest," Fel grumbled. "Myconids, man-eater blossoms, tree ants, nothing decent at all," Gun said with an air of indignation. "Seriously, it sucked. And then when we thought we'd finally found something worthwhile, it turned out to just be some shrimpy little scrap of meat. Boy, did that ever piss me off," Dora-chan complained. "Sway couldn't find any meat," our party's slime added. "I guess that means you struck out, huh? That's pretty rare, but it happens. Dinner's ready, in any case. You'll feel better after a good meal," I said as I brought out the garlic chive and gigant minotaur bowls. "It was a fool's errand indeed, but a good meal will be this evening's saving grace," Fel said with a frustrated scowl, then dug into his dish. "Your food is truly to die for, my liege. I'm starting to feel better already," Gun said between mouthfuls. He'd started eating the second his food was in front of him. "Yup, this stuff's awesome. I just wish the meat we found today was even half as good as this," Dora-chan said. "We'll get some next time, though. Next hunt, we'll catch something delicious for sure. This is really, really yummy, and Sway'll catch some tasty meat next time too." Sway agreed. Just like Dora-chan, it hadn't even finished stuffing its face, and yet it was already thinking about their next hunt. "This humiliation cannot stand, but soon we will have the perfect chance to vent our frustrations," Fel muttered with a dangerous glint in his eyes as he licked his chops. Feel. He hadn't come out and said it yet, but he was obviously plotting something. Unfortunately, all I could do was eat my rice bowl, shoot him a suspicious glare, and pray that whatever he ended up asking me to do, it wouldn't be too outrageous.